you're stealing from white girls though. How can you talk about weave? Assimilation is something I think that a lot of people look at and they say it's appropriation because they haven't read books. Yeah, that was a read. Those are the type of things that they were stigmatized for having. It was one of the ugly features of being black. However, now when we see a white person take on that feature, it's suddenly praised as beautiful, and all these Instagram girls, yeah, I'm calling you all out, all of these Instagram girls now have big lip. Black people cannot be racist. Hi guys, welcome to my channel. My name is SincerelyOghosa. If you haven't come across my channel before, I upload beauty, lifestyle, straight talking videos. Today's a straight talking videos, and if you want to see more of my videos, please make sure you subscribe. Click that subscribe button. The button will be down there, and also click the notification button as well so you can be part of the notification gang. Hey, this t-shirt is really cool. It's by Stargirl t-shirts. I will put their link below. I just thought it was cool because that afro thing kind of matches my hair. So today, straight talking video. Oh my gosh, today's something I've wanted to talk about for such a long time. I wanted to actually have blonde hair while I was doing this video because I thought it would just like make sense, but you know, God, just it wasn't meant to be. So yeah, here I am with my deep curly wave. It's cool. So yeah, let's talk about cultural appropriation and the age-old question: Are black girls allowed to wear blonde hair? Oh, you're stealing from white girls though. How can you talk about weave when... Let's talk about it, shall we? I feel like to have a conversation like this, you need to be intellectually equipped. Now, okay, to talk about the whole black girls allowed to wear blonde hair thing, we need to talk about cultural appropriation because they go hand in hand. Well, people say they go hand in hand, so let's talk about both of them. But the thing is, once you start to realize what, as we'll go through this video, I will talk about cultural appropriation and what it is. As we start to understand what cultural appropriation is, we start to realize actually that black girls having blonde hair doesn't constitute as cultural appropriation. The symptoms of cultural appropriation, or the reasons behind it, or the foundations of it are this. To have cultural appropriation, you need to have power, or there needs to be an element of power being played, and you also need to have erasure of a culture. I'll go into detail about that. And you also need to have stigmatization. I got there in the end. Real cultural appropriation comes from a dominant culture appropriating from a minority culture or a marginalized group. Now, when we say the word appropriate, I just wish all of you went to law school with me, because when you go to law school, they teach you, okay, law at university, because law school is different, they teach you what appropriation is, and actually appropriation is one of the main words used in a lot of the legislation to do with theft. If you're American, hey, how you doing? That may not be the case for you in the US, but my point is appropriation is a big part of theft. It means to take. So a lot of these times when the dominant group appropriates from the marginalized group, a lot of the time the thing that they are appropriating from them has caused the marginalized group to be stigmatized or to be prejudiced against. So something, for instance, cornrows or big lips, because of the whole Kylie Jenner thing. Big lips is something that black people have been, or African people have been, mocked for generations. It's something that during slavery they were mocked for, after slavery they were mocked for. Those are the type of things that they were stigmatized for having. It was one of the ugly features of being black. However, now when we see a white person take on that feature, it's suddenly praised as beautiful, and all these Instagram girls, yeah, I'm calling you all out, all of these Instagram girls now have big lips. And I think back to when I was in school, or when my aunties and uncles were in school in the West, and they were bullied for having these big lips. So it's usually when they've taken something from a marginalized group, and the marginalized group is prejudiced against, is treated badly or stigmatized or stereotyped because of that feature. A lot of the time as well, those marginalized groups are also penalized for having that feature, or that, because it can be hair, it can be lips, it can be your body, it can be the way you dress, the way you speak, your language. So for instance, a lot of people know online that we've been seeing a lot of stories about children especially being excluded or suspended from school. I think it's mostly suspended, or people being fired for having dreadlocks or having cane rows or having their natural hair out, or just being labeled as not work friendly or not professional or not neat enough. And it's that type of, it's that power play. This is where power comes into it. They are penalized by institutions for expressing that feature in whatever way that feature may be. For cultures, for generations and years and years and years, we've seen an exchange of fashion or elements of you taking care of your hair or different things in society. We've seen an exchange of this. So one example is Ankara is very big in other parts of Africa. Like, there's been an exchange. Usually with a lot of these things in history, there's usually an exchange of facets of the culture, like parts of the culture, elements of culture have been exchanged, and appreciation is an exchange is fine. If it's mutual, if it's from both sides of, oh, we love the way that you guys do this, let's try to do it your way, or we love the way you guys are doing it, okay, let's take some elements of what you're doing and incorporate what we do already. That's exchange. That's fine, because it's mutually beneficial. No one's, as I said, it's a power thing. No one's getting above the other. And also with stigmatization, that you're taking something that the other person has been stigmatized for and you're being celebrated for it, and the other person is down here with less power than you do, because they don't have power in the institutions, white people, and they also don't, they're also being stigmatized and they're being prejudiced against for having those features, those elements of the culture, blah blah blah. So now when we start to look at assimilation and appropriation, assimilation is something I think that a lot of people look at and they say it's appropriation because they haven't read books. Yeah, that was a read. Like, if you're looking at assimilation and appropriation, they're very different. Assimilation is conforming to a standard that's been set by the dominant group. So things like going to work wearing a suit, that is a standard that has been set by the dominant group. If you're living in England, America, let's not lie, white supremacy is a thing. I know people get really uncomfortable when white supremacy is mentioned, but it is what it is. This is the world that we're living in. We're living in a world that's, its cornerstone is white supremacy. So because of the standards set by a lot of white people through history, white men, I don't really know where the origin of suits comes from, but it's an example. Because of that, immigrants or whoever comes into that society, into that culture, they're like, oh, okay, I need to look like this to make sure I fit in. Because let's all be honest, on non-school uniform day, I know in the States, I don't know if you guys call it something else or wherever in the world you're watching from, hello, if we had non-school uniform day in the UK, it was a day where you don't wear uniform, right? You would wear English clothes. I remember if you wore African clothes, you would get teased relentlessly. I remember even thinking, oh my gosh, my parents cannot show up in Ankara. They cannot, because I would get teased relentlessly, which is just a symptom of assimilation. You're doing what you have to do to fit in. And a lot of the time weaves and things like that come into it, because if you go into the workplace, you're expected to look a certain way. You're expected to fit a certain ideal. And having an afro, having your natural hair, whether it be a twist out or whatever, or dreads or locks or a protective style, that's not a weave. If you have any of that showing that Africanness in you, it's seen as, okay, you're stepping out of line. So yeah, these women do feel like they have to wear weaves. I mean, we're hearing about people all the time who are getting fired, or they're feeling like they have to go to HR because someone's put their hand in their hair, or they've said something demeaning about their hair. So that's where assimilation comes into it. People mistake invitation into the culture as culture appropriation. If you are invited to a Nigerian wedding, it is not culture appropriation, obviously, if you come in African attire with your, you know, your orange beads and, you know, all of that, and your head wrap, your gele, all of that, that is not culture appropriation. You've been invited. So it's exactly the same as when you're appreciating a culture, when you're learning about it, you're going to the library to learn, you're traveling there, you're learning the language. That's not culture appropriation, but unfortunately that rarely happens. Usually what happens is people see an element of black culture and they take from it, and they're not interested in finding out anything about it. They're not interested in accrediting to whom honor is due in terms of what they've stolen from, who invented that thing that you've stolen from, where does it come from, what country does it originate from, what are the cultural practices that developed for this thing to be known. Like all of this stuff, like a lot of white people aren't interested. They just see it, they take it, they do it, and then luckily for them, they can just switch the hair when it's done, but for black people there are repercussions, which is a lot of the problems that comes from all of this. One of the things about cultural appropriation, as I said, is stigmatization, which I think I've mentioned a lot during this video, but it's very, very important to understand it, because once you understand it, you can see why this whole blonde hair black girl thing is just completely redundant. So one example of this is when Katy Perry, I actually remember when she did this, I think it was in the last 3 years, but if any of you guys know, please do comment below. She did a performance in which she had geishas performing behind her or fighting. I don't know what they were doing, but she had geishas behind her, and she was dressed in Japanese attire, except the whole thing of the whole debacle of it was a huge misrepresentation, because she had geishas behind her, which of course originate from Japan, but her actual outfit itself was kind of like partially Chinese. And it was just like, if I saw somebody performing a song that wasn't even Nigerian, or a song that wasn't Afrobeats, if I saw a white person performing their song in Kente, but they had Nigerian dancers behind them, I would be like, are you trying to say that all Africans are the same? It's just a huge misrepresentation, and it's just it shows that you have no care in, you're not even interested in understanding about the culture. You're just using it for fashion. And this is the thing, it's appropriating, it's taking, and it's doing it for your personal gain. And this is the thing, the originators of these features of the culture, whether it be hip-hop, the originators of these trends, of these technically these pieces of art from a culture, they're rarely credited, but we always have to deal with the consequences. Let's be honest, before Miley Cyrus came out with twerking, if like there was a video of black girls twerking in the club, everyone would be like, oh, these strippers, that. But when it's Miley Cyrus, it's suddenly fun, it's suddenly fashionable, because she says it is, because she's got that enhanced privilege of being a white woman. With all that we've learned about cultural appropriation and stigma and power play, race is all about power play. I will do another video about why black people cannot be racist. Yep, you heard me correctly, black people cannot be racist. I will do a video about that, but it's all about power play. It's all about the institutions that are able to uphold a standard which are unfortunate for some and favour others. The first step is definitely listening to marginalised groups. I don't know why it's so hard for white people to listen. This is not for all white people. I'm speaking to the white, when I say white people, I mean the white people who don't listen. But unfortunately, that is a lot. It's a lot. And I think hopefully this video will maybe go somewhere in terms of like teaching or helping them to understand, but that's if they want to listen. So it's like white people have to be open to listening to marginalized groups, and even like black people as well, listening to other marginalized groups in terms of what we can learn. What's frustrating is when a culture is consistently portrayed as primitive. Like look at how many charity adverts there are showing starving children in Africa, but there's never the other side of it. It's like there's this constant image of what Africans are, what black people are, and yet there's this constant appropriation of resources, whether that be physical or cultural resources. A lot of the time, black people are not appreciated when they are enjoying their own culture, but when white people take elements of that culture and enjoy it, they're appreciated for it. Things looking at history, and even just like recent history, like I'm really into like modern I'm really into like 80s rock, and seeing the who I'm not really who I'm not a really huge fan of, but I do like some of their songs. But looking at some of their performances, if you're not aware, the Who are a 1970s, I believe, that's when they had like their most popular day, 1970s, 1980s rock band. And they were very famous for trashing hotels. Like that, they're the ones who kind of like made that whole thing a thing. I don't know why that's a thing, but anyway, so they would just trash the whole place. They were notorious for just doing drugs, just drugs, like any type of drugs. And it was also a thing of when they were performing live, they would just crash their instruments. Sometimes when they did performances, they would set off fires, like on purpose. They would set off fire. like indoor fireworks, things just like literally things exploding. They were known as being kind of like troublemakers. But if you're looking at some of this footage like I have, you're thinking to yourself, no, this is actually very, very violent. And then if you look at people who have been involved in the hip-hop movement, look at like how NWA were stigmatized and chased by the police, literally chased by the police, and just completely hounded by the FBI and all of this stuff, saying that their lyrics are violent and saying that they're encouraging drugs. And I just look at all of these rock stars and how much they were involved in that kind of drug taking culture, but they were never ever stigmatized for that. They were never ever treated badly for that. It was kind of just like, oh, it's the 60s or it's the 70s or it's a new generation, like kids will be kids. But when it's black people, it's like they suddenly lose their humanity. Looking at all of this, you have to look at the power dynamics. When black girls wear blonde hair, it's not like they're not erasing the origins of black hair. Everybody knows where blonde hair comes from. Everybody knows it comes from white, like we see it on white girls. Yes, yeah, I know that some black people living in some area of the globe also have blonde hair, but for the most part, we are very aware that white women have blonde hair. We know where it comes from. Do you know what I mean? But if you ask the average white teen on the road and you ask them where cornrows come from, I bet you they'll say Kim Kardashian, or I bet you they'll say Kylie Jenner. And if they do realize it's from black people, it may take them a while for them to actually make the connection because of the erasure. So when black women wear blonde hair, the stigmatization, there's no stigmatization of white women for having blonde hair. There's stigmatization for black people having cornrows. Do you see? There's an idea that they look like a criminal. There's so many different stereotypes that come under it that are all negative, obviously, that come under having cornrows. But if you, in fact, blonde hair actually has a quite positive connotation in the Western world. It shows that you're innocent. All of that Aryan, freaky Hitler stuff all has those connotations to it. So it's not as if when black women are wearing blonde hair that they're enjoying it. Meanwhile, Oyinbo girls or white girls are being stigmatized for having the same feature. That also is not there. So no. Even the appropriation, the taking, is really just a celebration of the fact that, yeah, the blonde hair looks good on the black girl. It's not so much constantly taking from one culture while another culture is suffering for it. Nobody's suffering. Nobody's suffering from black girls having blonde hair. If you can name me somebody who's suffering for having blonde hair, let me know. Let me know. I would be very interested to know. But until then, yeah, that whole cultural appropriation thing doesn't run. The power dynamic also isn't there. When a black person borrows the blonde influence and has blonde weave, there's no power play anyway, because black people have less power than white people already. So if you don't know that, then just look through all my other videos, because I don't even have time to explain that to you. And this is the problem when it's an institutionalized thing, where it's legally they have less power, economically they have less power, they have less power when it comes to equal pay, they have less power when it comes to that people go admitted into certain schools. All of these different things come into the whole power play, but none of these things are being affected by these black girls having these blonde hair. So let them just have the blonde hair that they want to have. So in terms of the cultural appropriation for black girls having blonde hair, there is none. I think I'm done. Thank you so much for watching the video. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope it was useful. Don't forget to subscribe, man. Be part of the team. Yeah, be part of the team. Subscribe, and definitely sign up. Click the bell ting so you can be part of the notification gang. If you want to subscribe, just click over there. There'll be like a round ting. Yeah. And then if you want to watch my last video, which you should, it's there. Then subscribe. Thanks for watching. Bye.